Hi, welcome back. In today's video I want to talk about the 12 things you should not do here in Brazil. And most of these I've picked up over the years as I've lived here, and I think I've learned most of them the hard way, whereby I've done them and then realized afterwards that, oh yeah, maybe that's not what you do here in Brazil. So let's start with the first ones. So number one is don't get freaked out by all the hugging and kissing that happens when you greet Brazilians. So in general, Brazilians love physical contact. So when a man greets a woman, that could be a friend, a neighbor, someone at work, then usually you kiss on the cheek. And that can be one kiss, two kisses, or three kisses. All depends on the situation and where in Brazil you are. And I live in the south of Brazil, and here usually it's two kisses, so one kiss on each cheek. And then when a man greets another man, then in a lot of cases it's a handshake and a kind of a manly hug. Now this was a bit of a shock for me, because in Sweden, where I'm from, you kind of shake hands most of the time. It doesn't really matter what situation it is, usually we shake hands, because we Swedes don't really like physical contact that much, in general. When I arrived in Brazil, I found it, a bit awkward, all these hugs and kisses all the time, every time we were meeting someone. And for me, I think one of the strangest things was when I was greeting friends and family. So these were people that I'm seeing every week, and they still wanted to greet and hug and kiss every time. And for me, I just felt that was a bit unnecessary, because, why are we hugging and kissing again? I saw you a few days ago, and I'll see you in a few days again. So surely it's not necessary to keep kissing and greeting like this every time. So this just shows the differences in culture between Sweden and Brazil. But it is worth noting that it isn't like this in the whole of Brazil. So here in the south of Brazil, there's quite a few towns with a lot of German influence. So these towns received a lot of German immigrants 100 years ago, 150 years ago. And in these towns, you actually do hug and kiss less and shake hands more. So it does really depend on where you live in Brazil, how much this happens. Okay, so number two is don't come to Brazil without learning a bit of Portuguese. So in Brazil, many Brazilians cannot speak English, or their English is very simple. So my experience is that in most places in Brazil, you need to be able to understand and speak a bit of simple Portuguese in order to get by. So things like talking to a taxi driver, Uber driver, a waiter in a restaurant, a worker in a store, in a checkout. So for these kinds of things, you need to speak a bit of Portuguese. But saying that, you can come here as a tourist and stay in a big hotel near the beach. There you'll have workers who can speak English, and you can also go to the big cities, and there you'll have tour guides who speak English. So I mean, it is possible as a tourist to get by just with English if you do things like that. But if you want to be a bit more independent and explore a few things by yourself, then knowing a few Portuguese words and also understanding some basic Portuguese helps a lot. But saying that, there are lots of Brazilians who are very good at speaking English, especially the younger generations. So it's definitely improving here in Brazil. And a good thing about Brazil is that if you do try and speak English with someone or some very simple Portuguese, they don't get offended or aggressive with you, which can happen in some other countries. I'm not going to mention which countries I'm referring to, but here in Brazil, there's none of that. Some might get a bit shocked and a bit scared if you try and start speaking English with them, but that's about all that's going to happen. Okay, so number three is don't arrive on time to parties or when you meet a Brazilian friend. So things are pretty relaxed here in terms of timekeeping here in Brazil. Not with everything, but when it comes to parties and meeting a friend, it's okay to arrive 20 minutes late, 30 minutes late, or even more to these things. Now again, this is completely different to Sweden. So in Sweden, it's all about being punctual. So someone invites you to a party at 7, and Swedish people arrive there at 7. And also if you agree with a friend to meet in a cafe, then you arrive on time. When I arrived in Brazil and I was invited to some parties, I turned up on time, and I was the first one there. And actually a lot of the time the people organizing the parties hadn't even finished organizing the parties. So I kind of helped them finalize the party, putting things out on the tables and bringing chairs and stuff. So then I quickly realized that no, I need to turn up a bit late to these things. And one phrase that Brazilians have, when you call them up and you ask them, where are you? Why haven't you arrived yet? The phrase is "Eu estou chegando." Now this translates as "I'm arriving," but actually what it should translate into is "I'm leaving my house now and I'll be there in half an hour" or something. And that's happened many times to me, where I'm sitting waiting for a Brazilian friend to arrive. They don't arrive, so then I call them, and then they say, "Oh, I'm arriving," and then I think, "Oh, good, okay." So they're arriving in the next 5 minutes, and then they arrive 30 minutes later. Yeah, so that was very annoying at the beginning, but then I just realized that it's just the way it is here, so then I just accepted it. But it is worth noting again that it does depend a bit on where you live. So again, here in the south, we've got this German influence. People are a lot more punctual than Brazilians in other areas. Okay, so point number 4 is don't take off your shoes or your coat when you arrive at a Brazilian's house. So when I was invited by a Brazilian friend to their house, I arrived and my instinct was, okay, I need to take off my shoes because that's what you do in Sweden. But then I realized that no one else is taking off their shoes and everyone's just walking straight into the house. And the same applies with the coats as well. So in winter time here down in the south, it can get a bit cold. So it can go down to 0 degrees, not very often. And I mentioned in another video that a lot of Brazilians' houses are very cold in winter because they don't have central heating and they don't like to switch on the air conditioning to heat their houses and apartments. So that means when you're invited to someone's house, again, you arrive there at the door and you don't take off the shoes, but then you keep your coat on because it's a bit cold inside the house. And for Swedes it's very weird because you take your shoes off and your coat when you go inside the house. But it's not all Brazilians that keep their shoes and coat on inside their homes, so when you go and visit someone you just need to be observant. Okay, so number 5 is don't be a vegetarian here in Brazil. So I mean, Brazilians, they love their meat, especially their barbecues. And here in the south of Brazil, they like to have their barbecues every weekend. They invite friends and family over. And the barbecues are a big thing and can last the whole day. And the barbecues consist of a lot of beef, but also lamb, pork, and chicken, and sausages as well. And I would say the best barbecued meat that I've experienced is here in the south of Brazil. So Brazilians in general are very good at barbecuing meat, and I think it's the practice they get by having the barbecues every weekend. Now obviously it's possible to be vegetarian here in Brazil, and there are many Brazilians who are, but it is slightly more tricky here. So for example, if you go to restaurants, a lot of restaurants don't have specific vegetarian dishes. So you kind of just have to choose a salad and maybe order some side dishes or something. And also in the supermarkets as well, there aren't that many vegetarian meals and stuff. I mean, it's getting better, but it's still less than what you have in Sweden. And okay, and number 6, which is also food related, is don't be shocked how cold Brazilians serve their beer. So Brazilians love their beer ice cold, which kind of makes sense because here in Brazil it's hot for most of the year, and so it is a lot more refreshing to have an ice cold beer. But I do like my ales and my stouts as well, which are kind of served at room temperature, and it's a lot more difficult to find these in restaurants and pubs. I mean, if I go to the big supermarkets here in Brazil, then I will find a couple of stouts and ales, but it is pretty limited. And some say that another reason why Brazilians serve beer so ice cold is because they don't taste that good. And so they kind of hide the bad taste by making it so cold. Now I would agree that some Brazilians beers, I'm not going to mention which ones, don't taste that good. But there are lots that are very good. Especially if you buy beer from the smaller breweries, then you've got beers that are just as good as European beers. Okay, number 7 is don't wear flip-flops which aren't Havaianas to the beach. So when Brazilians go to the beach, most of them wear these flip-flops which are Y-shaped. And the big brand here in Brazil that make these flip-flops is Havaianas. I mean, there are others as well. But in Europe, many wear slide-in flip-flops or sandals with different types of straps. And if you wear these, then people will basically know that you're a foreigner or a gringo. And also if you go to the beach with a towel and you put the towel down on the sand and lie on it, Again, people know that you're a foreigner because not many Brazilians do that. Most Brazilians, they go to the beach with beach chairs, or they rent beach chairs on the beach and sit on those. Very few lie on a towel on the beach. Yeah, so if you do any of those two things, then people basically know that you're a foreigner, which doesn't really matter, but if you do want to blend in, then just follow these rules. Okay, number 8 is don't drive in Brazil. Now, I'm only joking. I mean, I drive in Brazil, but you do have to be a bit more careful with road safety here in Brazil. So when I started driving here in Brazil, I felt that people were driving very quickly here compared to Sweden. So I mean, I usually drive at the speed limit or maybe slightly above it sometimes. But a lot of times I would have people behind me getting frustrated, wanting to overtake me because they felt I was not driving quick enough. And another thing is there are loads of motorcycles on the road here in Brazil. And they love to weave in between cars, drive in between cars. So you just have to be very careful when you're changing lanes or making a turn, that there's no motorbike coming really quickly behind you and you don't see it and you hit it. And another thing is that a lot of cars undertake on highways and motorways. So like if you're in the middle lane on a highway, you've got cars overtaking you on the left and the right. And for me, that just felt very dangerous. So again, when you're changing lanes, you need to pay attention to that you can have a car coming past you on both sides. And then finally, another thing is roundabouts. So Brazil doesn't have that many roundabouts compared to kind of Sweden and England and so on, but they do have some, but they don't have one standard rule for these roundabouts. So on some roundabouts, it's the person entering the roundabout that needs to give way, which kind of makes sense to me, and that's kind of how it is in Sweden. But then there are other roundabouts in Brazil where no, it's the person on the roundabout that needs to give way to the person entering the roundabout. And with these roundabouts, they're kind of drawn on the road and put a stop sign to kind of indicate that this is what you have to do. But a lot of cases it's not very clear, and I've had some near misses where I'm on the roundabout thinking, oh, I've got right of way, and then poof, no, I have to stop. So that's just another thing you need to pay attention to. Okay, number 9, which is also car related, is don't slam the car doors when you close them. So in general, Brazilians don't like it when you close the car door with a bit of force. Now, I'm not talking about slamming it with all the force you have. I'm talking about, closing it with a bit of force, which in Sweden would be a normal thing. But here in Brazil, they like you to close it very gently. And yeah, I've annoyed many people here by the way I close the car doors. And yeah, you don't want to see my rating that I have on the Uber app, because I've annoyed many Uber drivers by closing the car doors too forcefully. So I think Brazilians, when you do that, I think Brazilians think that you're angry, a bit aggressive, a bit rude. But I mean, it's none of that when I do it. I just close it how I've closed doors my whole life. But yeah, it's just a simple thing to consider. And number 10, also car related, but more to do with safety, and that is don't sit in a parked car. So this mainly applies to when you're in big cities. So if you're going to park the car on the street, then obviously check before you start parking that there's nothing dodgy around, and then park the car and then kind of leave the car fairly quickly. What you don't want to do is park the car and then sit in the car and look at your mobile for a few minutes, maybe because you arrived a bit early or something. No, kind of park it and then leave, because there's a risk that if you stay in the car that you can be mugged. Someone might steal your mobile and your phone, or even worse, steal your car. And this happens a fair bit, so I know some friends and family who have, sat in their car when they're parked and then they get mugged or their car has been stolen. So I would recommend that if you're in big cities, you park in private car parks that have security. But this mainly applies to the big cities. When you're in the smaller towns, a lot of these are very safe, and there you can park your car and sit in it and there's no problem. Okay, number 11, which is also safety related, is don't walk around showing your valuables. So that means don't walk around on the streets talking on your phone or your mobile. Don't hold your wallet in your hand, it should be in a bag or your pocket, and don't wear lots of expensive jewelry when you're walking around as well. And this again applies mainly to the big cities, where there's a risk that you might get mugged if you show off your valuables. And I guess this rule applies more and more now to cities in the States and Europe as well, because there kind of muggings are increasing a lot. So this is more kind of a common sense rule that kind of applies around the world now. And like I mentioned in the previous one about parking your car, if you're in the small towns there, they can be very safe. And for example, where I live in the south of Brazil, in a small town, I can walk around talking on my mobile, no problems at all. But if I go to the big cities, then I don't do that. Then I just keep the mobile in my pocket and I only use it when I'm inside and I feel safe. Okay, and number 12, and the last one is, don't flush toilet paper down the toilet. So here in Brazil, many toilets have a little bin next to them, and that's where you should throw the toilet paper and not flush it down. And this is because the plumbing in a lot of Brazilian homes, offices, restaurants, stores, just can't take toilet paper being flushed down and they get clogged. Now, for me, when I arrived, I found this very weird, found it a bit disgusting as well, and also annoying because you're constantly having to remove the plastic bag and replace it, so it just means one more task to do around the house. Now, there are some new areas with new homes and office buildings where you can flush it down. But for me, I would say that 90% of the places I go to have small bins next to the toilet, and you can't flush down the toilet paper. And actually, a friend of mine told me a funny story. So he's foreign as well, and he rented a house here in Brazil, and he did not accept the fact that he could not flush toilet paper down the toilet, so he kept flushing it down. And then one day all the toilet stopped working and all the pipes got clogged, and they had to call over the landlord, and the landlord brought the plumber over, and the plumber started investigating, and he just found all of his toilet paper stuck in the pipes. And I think my friend wasn't at home at the time, so the landlord asked his wife, "Who is flushing all this toilet paper down the toilet?" And the wife said, "Don't look at me, it's my stupid husband." So yeah, when you're in Brazil and you need to go to the bathroom, just have a look out for that. Okay, so those are the 12 things not to do here in Brazil. Obviously there are lots more, but these are kind of the key ones that stuck out for me. And like I said, it's not like this in the whole of Brazil. There are exceptions, so you just need to be kind of observant and aware of this when you're traveling around Brazil. So I hope you like this video. Please leave a like, subscribe. If you've got any questions or anything, leave in the commentary below. So thanks for watching. Until next time.